But I do think one thing that really irks me on the left, and I don't really have a lot of faith in the right, so you tend to criticize the people that you line up more, that you care more about, and that would be the Democrats for me. People lost trust in them because the voters were saying there was a concern. There were people across the board saying they had a concern. And the Democrats said, no, over here, look over here. They told the voters what to care about, and they did not listen when the voters said they cared. So these stories come out aren't about beating a dead horse. It's saying if they could have a fair conversation that we heard you, we saw it as they saw it, they'd be gaining some of the voters back to say, okay, we're not going to keep saying that.
You agree with that?
It started like any quiet morning on the Viola Roundtable until someone lit a match and tossed it into a powder keg. They were supposed to be calmly dissecting the 2024 election, but then one host asked the unaskable, is Biden still mentally there? Boom, the studio froze, smiles vanished, and suddenly the conversation went nuclear. One host went off script, unleashing a chaotic tirade, ranting about billionaires, collapsing healthcare, fascism rising, and some unhinged claim about cancer research being buried by the administration. It was part panic, part meltdown, and zero accountability. Then came the racial landmine. Why are white South African immigrants getting more protection than Afghan or black refugees? The room went dead silent. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate. The topic wasn't Biden anymore. It was a full-blown identity crisis for the Democratic Party. No one wanted to talk about the man at the top. They just danced, deflected, and detonated. And when the dust settled, viewers were left wondering, if there's nothing wrong with Biden, why does the truth cause this much panic?
77% of Americans in 2023 said Joe Biden was too old to run again. And they were told, sit down, shut up, he is the nominee. And then when it became untenable and he stepped aside, they anointed Kamala Harris. There was not a primary, there was not a democratic process. And then when she lost, they said, don't look backward, we're moving forward, we're not even going to talk about why we didn't listen to you. We had Joe Biden here last week. It was an honor to have him. I think he is a good man. I do not think he could have been president for 4 more years. The hardest job on the planet.
Can this guy be president?
He was elected. I didn't vote for
Wait,
him.
real quick, but he also, President Biden took responsibility at this table, which is something that I'm frustrated with the Democrats. He said,
he did take
this falls on me. And I said that was the clearest answer of what people needed to hear.
Alyssa wasn't about to stay quiet. While her co-host spun excuses, she came in like a wrecking ball. She didn't just challenge the narrative, she torched it. This isn't damage control, she snapped. It's a full-blown cover-up. And not just any cover-up, the biggest political betrayal of our time. She accused the party of shielding a man unfit to lead, calling it a dangerous lie wrapped in silence. And in that moment, the show stopped being a debate. It became a reckoning.
People are quoted in this book of saying they would be boxed out of meetings if they raise concerns, and there's very specific examples. George Clooney goes on the record to Jake Tapper and says he moved mountains. He flew in from Italy to do this record fundraiser for Joe Biden. Joe Biden didn't recognize George Clooney, one of the most recognizable men on the planet. And now that's not a presidential duty. It's not the job. You don't have to recognize George Clooney. But does that give you confidence that in the middle of the night, if China's about to attack us, there's a war breaking out in Iran, that he is the sharpest person to be able to handle that?
Which administration texted war plans to their brother?
It's just like Joe Biden. No, but do we just keep lowering the bar because Trump is bad? Nothing else is bad because Trump is bad?
But that can also be true.
Yeah, but the ship has sailed. It's out in the ocean somewhere with Biden. It's over. Get over it.
No, we have Trump because you guys screwed this up.
All right, but does it help?
Alyssa dropped the bomb. The country had been lied to for 4 years. By the party, the press, and the very gatekeepers of democracy. And just when things couldn't get more heated, Sarah fired back with the harshest truth of all. This wasn't about Trump or taxes. This was about betrayal from their own side. While voters begged for clarity, the Democrats gaslit them, insisting Biden was just fine, even as the evidence mounted in plain sight. Sarah didn't mince words. They treated voters like children, too dumb to notice the emperor had no clue where he was. And then came the real explosion. Whispers turned to accusations. Biden wasn't leading, he was being led by Pelosi, Schumer, even Obama, a president possibly unaware of what he was signing, what deals he was making, what crises he was ignoring. The hosts weren't just angry, they were horrified. This wasn't a debate anymore. This was a national trust implosion, broadcast live. Then came the moment that froze the room. The hosts brought up the pride flags on the White House, not as a symbol of inclusion, but as proof that everything around Biden had become political theater. According to them, he didn't even make that call. It was just more stagecraft meant to sell the illusion that he was in control. But the truth, they claimed, was far darker. The real Joe Biden had been sidelined, mentally, emotionally, politically. And those around him didn't just let it happen, they orchestrated it. That's when the conversation went global. While the American press told voters Biden was sharp and steady, world leaders weren't fooled. Putin wasn't laughing at late-night talk shows. Xi Jinping wasn't moved by photo ops. They saw weakness, real, unfiltered, undeniable, and they acted. Russia invaded Ukraine. China stepped up threats to Taiwan. Iran backed strikes with zero hesitation. These weren't random world events. The accusation made on air was blunt. Our enemies saw a confused, fragile American president and made their move. Because you can spin the media, but you can't bluff the world stage. Biden's stumbles, the pauses, the forgetfulness, it all signaled one thing to them. Now's the time. And just when the tension was at its peak, Sunny swerved off the rails. Instead of confronting any of it, she pivoted into a political monologue, rattling off generic party lines about fighting fascism, saving Medicaid, protecting pensions. It was like she was in an entirely different debate. Alyssa and Sarah were calling for truth. Sunny was drowning the moment in slogans. Then came the most baffling move of all. She brought up race, claiming Biden prioritized South African white refugees over Afghans and Ukrainians. A comment that felt thrown in just to ignite a distraction. No context, no relevance, just pure deflection. What should have been a moment of reckoning turned into a circus of noise. And the more she talked, the clearer it became. This wasn't just spin, it was full-blown denial. Sunny wanted a clean slate. Forget the lies, forget the missteps. Her solution was simple. Focus on beating Trump. But the rest of the panel wasn't buying it. The tension in the room stretched so tight you could practically hear it snap. And when Sunny shifted from conversation to full-on resistance mode, the split became undeniable. Resistance to what exactly? That's what Alyssa pressed her on. Democrats didn't control the House. They didn't control the Senate. And by Alyssa's account, they didn't even have a functioning president. So what was all this resistance aimed at? Sunny wasn't talking about strategy or policy. She wanted confrontation, protest, pressure. But pressure against whom? Alyssa called it out. The Democrats had already tried everything. Marches, hashtags, moral grandstanding, smear campaigns. They shouted, they staged, they lost. And now, the only thing left in Sunny's playbook felt dangerously close to chaos. Not because it would help, but because they couldn't face the truth. Their side failed. They picked the wrong guy, and instead of owning up, they pointed fingers, smeared voters, and called everyone else the enemy. Then Alyssa stopped pulling punches. She looked Sunny dead in the eye and said the words no one else dared to. Joe Biden is not mentally fit to be president. The air went still. This wasn't just political theater. She came armed with facts. In 2023, a staggering 77% of Americans, not just Republicans, said Biden was too old to run again, but the party didn't listen. There was no open debate, no primary. They just handed him the crown. And when the pressure built, they tried to pass it to Kamala, again, without letting voters decide. When Alyssa pointed that out, Sunny shrugged. No outrage, no defense, just quiet acceptance that democracy could be skipped. Alyssa kept going. She reminded everyone Biden had just been on The View the week before. She didn't vote for him, but she still hoped he'd show some accountability. And for a fleeting second, he did. He said, "This falls on me." But one moment of honesty can't undo 4 years of gaslighting, and Sunny's casual attitude only proved the point. The refusal to admit the obvious was the real scandal. Then came the moment that hit hardest. Alyssa revealed something off camera. At a major fundraiser, Joe Biden failed to recognize George Clooney, one of the most famous people on the planet. And sure, being starstruck isn't a job requirement, but if you can't identify someone that iconic in a relaxed setting, how do you expect to handle a 3 a.m. call about war or national security? It wasn't funny, it was terrifying. Joy Behar jumped in with her usual safety net. But Trump, she dragged the whole conversation back to January 6th, tried to erase every concern about Biden's decline by bringing up the past. It was her go-to panic button, slam it and hope the discussion resets. But this time, it didn't land, because no one was asking if Trump was perfect. They were asking if Joe Biden was even present. The real question wasn't about Trump, it was about how Biden managed to drift through 4 years in a mental haze while no one on his side said a word. And when the topic came up, Joy Behar dodged it completely. For her, loyalty to the party mattered more than loyalty to the facts. The second she dragged the conversation back to "but Trump," for the millionth time, everything fell apart. Alyssa was done playing nice. She cut through the noise and called it what it was: an embarrassing attempt to distract from a collapsing presidency. There's a difference between a political misstep and an administration that's been sleepwalking through crises for years. And instead of owning that failure, the Democrats kept pretending everything was under control. Alyssa wasn't buying it, and neither was the audience. This wasn't a strategy issue. It was full-on self-delusion. The left sold themselves as the party of integrity, intelligence, and compassion. But as the economy buckled, as violence surged, and as America's enemies moved in, they kept repeating the same line: "We're the good guys." Even when the voters started shouting back, asking tough questions, demanding change, the party didn't pause. They didn't reflect. They blamed. They pointed fingers at everyday Americans and called them ungrateful, backwards, or brainwashed. Alyssa and Sarah saw right through it, and they made something brutally clear. Trump didn't win because he tricked people. He won because Democrats refused to listen. The message from the Democratic elite was loud and clear: if you don't agree, you're the problem. And that smug certainty was driving voters away in droves. While Trump was addressing crime, inflation, and job loss, the Democrats were focused on symbolism and spectacle: rainbow flags on government buildings, drag performances for children, and when people objected, they were smeared as hateful or ignorant. But Alyssa wasn't having it. She said what many were thinking: the more disconnected the party became, the more dangerous their denial got. And if they didn't course correct fast, they were heading straight into another election disaster, one that might finish what 2016 started. Because this wasn't just about Joe Biden. This was about the entire Democratic ecosystem that shielded him. For 4 years, it wasn't just the president in decline. It was a party willing to rewrite reality to keep power.